seconds to LOS Tidris.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts. Guys, this is season 5 to the Podcast Discovery Show.
Season 5 hype.
Hype, guys. And you know what? It may have sounded a little bit different. It sounded a little bit different because Zach made a new intro song that is amazing, and it's got some awesome clips from NASA's Discovery launch.
Yeah, special shout out to NASA.
I love it. It's our best collab. But also, like, it's our original music, but he just changed it a little bit. So it still sounds familiar, but it's got a lot of extra stuff to it. I love it, man.
Yeah, no, I was pretty happy that we were able to keep it because we've had that music for 5 years now, approximately.
That's so long, but also it's awesome. Okay, so we're going into season 5, and we talk about it a lot, but every single year around this time of year, me and Zach, or me, Zach, and Josh back in the day, would sit down around this time and we would try to figure out what are some changes that we can make that we think will make the podcast a little bit better. And I mean, that's why we're streaming. That's why we have a YouTube. That's why we've done a lot of iterations of the show. Hopefully, each iteration making it a little bit better. So, with that said, we've got a lot of announcements for you guys.
We've got changes. And the first one
Zach, why don't you give us the first one?
Yeah, so in general, the show we called Todd's, the bonus show we had for a long time, the show that used to come out early in the week, was originally not even designed to be a show. We started recording us getting ready for this show. It was all just kind of, improvising the whole time. You know, we never really sat down with intention and worked it out. But we think we have a new name for the show, and it is Discovery Weekly. So instead of referencing this show, it is going to just be a weekly Discovery show. And basically, we're pretty excited about that happening. It's still going to be on the feed, at least for now, until there's some time where it makes sense for us to make its own feed. We're not going to. You know, we're going to keep doing it, so we're going to just keep it on the feed for now.
Yeah, so from now on, it's going to be Discovery Weekly, and instead of it coming out on Mondays and PDS coming out on Wednesdays, we're going to switch it up a little bit. PDS is going to release every Monday on all the podcatchers, and then the bonus show, with being the Discovery Weekly, will be coming out on Wednesdays.
Yeah, and kind of along that same scheduling line, we're going to be trying Saturdays on Twitch for our live stream of our show now. We just want to kind of mess around with it. We know that a lot of our friends, a lot of our fellow Twitch streamers and stuff, they have their main show of the week is on Fridays. And so we wanted to find a time and see if it would kind of increase the amount of people we could get in here, and then also increase our ability to kind of raid people or expose people to other cool channels on Friday nights.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, and probably one of my things that I'm most excited about is this year, we're going to shoot for once a month, maybe more, maybe less if something falls through. We're going to try to have a guest on once a month to bring their recommendation. Probably another podcaster, someone within the podcast universe that we are in. I will say we've got a list of people we're reaching out to. If some of the stuff works out, it's going to be some people that you guys have heard of, and it's going to be exciting to have them on our show.
Yeah, it'd be really fun, for sure. Like, have you guys ever heard of Bill Gates? Just kidding. Not that. Just kidding. But yeah,
Hey, we have a list. Why'd you?
Is he in the list?
Yeah,
put him on the list. He has a podcast.
He does have a podcast. But yeah, so the main goal there is we're just two dudes, and we kind of have the same interests. We have our own interests, and we want to try to find somebody else with a different, I guess, angle to bring something fresh.
Yeah,
maybe
new
once
discoveries
per
from
month.
people.
Exactly. So that's kind of our mindset on that, as well as we just love making new friends and getting to know people a little bit better. That's why we wanted to do, the live streams and stuff like that, because we really like just kind of interacting with our audience and now interacting with our fellow podcasters.
Yeah, we definitely want to make podcasting more interactive because it typically isn't. It typically is you can leave a rating or review, or you can, I guess, tweet at them. But other than that, it's not as interactive as we were wanting it to be. So it's been a really fun thing trying to continually get new iterations of how the show can be, and we're pumped about season 5.
Yeah, no, we are very excited about season 5. Okay, housekeeping is out of the way. Let's dive into the first discussion in 2021, which we're going to be talking about the show Fraudsters. And we always try to pick a show that is fairly long form at the end of our season so that you have plenty of time to listen to it. So we picked 3 episodes because that's the way that they were doing their format, at least at the time, is they would pick a fraudster and they would kind of break it into 2 or 3 episodes talking about them. And so we picked the first 3 episodes, and they're talking about Miss Cleo. And what Fraudsters is, according to them, Fraudsters is an all-you-can-eat buffet of liars, cheats, and scammers. Hosts Seena, Ghaznavi, and Justin Williams cover every flavor of fraud you can imagine, from fake psychic hotlines to corporations cooking the books.
Yeah, and it's hosted by, like Kirk just said, one of whom is Justin Williams, and he's from Kansas City and a comedian that's played at a lot of different festivals across the U.S. and Canada, and he's been on several Comedy Central things, Mashable, Sirius Radio. He's been on a lot of different things, bringing his comedy and things like that. And the other host is Seena.
Yeah, Seena, okay, I've got his bio pulled up, and it would take the rest of the show to read his bio because he has done a lot of things. But in a nutshell, I want to read just a little bit of it. He's a comedian, a producer, actor, and lawyer. He's a the way he puts it, he's a center left tech forward progressive who lives by the simple phrase funny comes first. So he's directed movies, he's acted in movies, and he's currently a lawyer. It's pretty crazy. And he's the host of this show, and he also has another podcast called The Brighter Side, which the way they put it in here is it's a hardcore self-help that attempts to put a positive spin on subjects like depression, rage, and jealousy. And I'm actually really curious to listen to that show as well.
Yeah, I'm curious too. But yeah, the episode of Fraudsters, well, they end up doing it in like pairs of 3. And so we were looking. When we heard about the show, we wanted to check it out. And this was actually, we were driving and we knew we had time. And we saw one that I found out, and they talk about a little bit on this show, it dates you a little bit if you get this reference. But we saw a name that was unforgettable to our brains, and we had to find out more. The first 3 episodes of their show are about Miss Cleo and the Psychic Readers Network.
Miss Cleo, call me now. I still can visualize these ridiculous commercials in my living room as like an 8-year-old. I don't even know how old we were when this happened, but I remember this being on the commercials all the time. And it was funny because even now, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it almost seems kind of endearing. And I think there's like a little bit of nostalgia to it, even though it's literally a giant phone scam scheme.
Yeah, and I did not like pick up on that at the time. We'll get more into it. But yeah, no, I just was like, there's a Jamaican lady who is a psychic and is on TV all the time. They're always telling you to call Miss Cleo. I feel like the main reason that I never really went down the rabbit hole on that was because I knew my mom would kill me if I tried to call any kind of service that cost money. If I tried to call anything that would cost money on our phone bill, I would have been killed immediately.
Yeah, so she was the spokesperson for this organization, this organization is the one that was doing the main part of the fraud. Granted, she had a history of some fraudster stuff, like a long history, and she continued even further. Like,
yeah, it never stopped.
I do feel a little bit bad because she is no longer with us, so I don't want to speak too ill of the dead. But yeah, she definitely was essentially a con artist in a lot of ways. But this organization that she was working with, the Psychic Readers Network, It was all this giant scam where you would call a 1-800 number and then they would make you immediately call a 1-900 number, which costs a bunch of money.
Yeah. 800 is toll free. 900 is not.
And so then they would ask you for all this information. And during that information that they're asking you for, oh, I forgot to say, they promise you 3 free minutes and they're going to give you a reading in 3 minutes, right? Bam, bam, bam. They're going to tell you your future so fast. But then, you know what I visualized? I visualized the Zootopia sloth like asking,
Yeah,
what's your address?
Yeah, pretty
You
much.
know?
Pretty much, and slowly typing while you sit there and look frustrated.
Exactly. So they're asking you for all of this information you probably shouldn't be giving to most people anyway over the phone. And they're taking all your information in. Let's say they take 5 minutes doing that. You're already past that free time and you're already getting billed. And what was it? It was like $4 a minute or something
like
ridiculous.
$5 a minute on that 900 line, which is crazy money.
It's so much money. And they talked about with people that work there, they wanted them to have a 12-minute minimum, like minimum.
Yeah, they wanted them to push towards 15 to 20.
But I love that if you were on the phone for 60 minutes, they would hang up on you because they knew that your phone bill was going to shock you so much you're going to try to dispute it. Because at 60 minutes, that's $300.
$300 to talk to Miss Cleo. No thanks. That's my problem with it. It's like, yeah, would I talk to Miss Cleo if it was free? Yes, I would. It'd be fun. But at $300, no thank you.
And through this whole scheme, this organization brought in over $1 billion with a B.
$1 billion of just being fake psychics on the phone. And like,
oh, and they talk so much later on about how fake it was. The psychics, it's
okay, so
unbelievable.
Yeah, so a little bit about this show. The first episode really hones in on Miss Cleo herself. So she had a wide history of literally ripping people off multiple times. I don't think she's even from Jamaica. She's like, her family was from the Caribbean, but it's not like she was from Jamaica and had an accent because she grew up in Jamaica. That's a fake accent.
Like Irvine, California or something.
It's all fake. The whole thing is like a character based off one of her earlier scams where she had a fake play that she made and raised a bunch of money for and then got fake cancer. And she was constantly scamming everybody, like the whole time. And so she had all this stuff. She had made this character, and this character just, I don't know why. I guess it's just peak 90s ridiculous shenanigans or I guess that might have been early 2000s, late 90s. But it was just that it kind of just fit in that time. I don't know how else, because I don't really know how much of a space there is for this now. I guess you probably could still get people though. So, okay. Do you believe in like psychics? Have you ever had like a psychic reading?
I have never had any psychic readings, no tarot cards, nothing like that.
The only thing we had was those weird animal ones from that girl on you know what I'm talking about? It was like off-brand tarot cards when we were doing chat roulette.
Oh man, that was an interesting thing.
It was.
That's a whole different story. When it was three of us, I mean, I wish you wouldn't have said the word. And I'm seeing so many different images that I don't want to see in my head right now.
It's mostly one image, so you don't want to see in your head over and over again on chat roulette.
Long story short, we thought it was funny after recording one of the podcasts to get on chat roulette and just see who's on there. It's mainly what you think, but then there was some random people that were actually fascinating. There was an older gentleman that all he was doing was trying to play guitar for whoever jumped into the chat. And it was awesome. He played us some guitar. He was really cool. He didn't get naked. And it was the best experience.
I will say this. It's impossible to unsee the things that we saw that night. But
yeah, I wouldn't recommend. 1 star. I don't recommend.
But the response was amazing because, okay, people act in a not great way when it's anonymous video chat that you hop into with a random person. We'll just leave it at that. Everybody gets it. You've been on there. But when they would log in and be doing their inappropriate things, they would see me, Kirk, and Josh sitting around the table, all holding microphones and freak out. Like that was, we didn't have to close these things. They closed them because they're like, oh, I'm bailiff from whatever's happening here. There's so many dudes over there. Why do they have microphones? And then they just bail. So it ended up making it funny at least. But we did have somebody
It
from, I
was
think she was
funny.
from Australia,
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
read us like some off-brand tarot cards. But here's my problem with psychics as like kind
I
of
like
like
to believe that she's a listener to our show now because we told her what we were and what we were doing, and she said she was going to check us out. So if you are that woman that was living in a nice mobile home in the countryside of Australia and you did these weird angel tarot cards to us, hi, reach
here
out
we
to
are.
us. Here we are.
Yeah, but in general, I feel like psychics is not very well defined. You know what I mean? Because okay, do I think that you could call Miss Cleo and she'd be like, "Oh, I know deep insight about your life"? No, I don't really think that's a thing. I don't think that
Mm-mm.
you can call somebody on the phone and they're gonna like see through the nether portals and know what your future is or anything like that. You know what I mean? And so
Nether portals.
I just don't. I feel like it's all very like hand wavy, like oh, it's just they're psychic. They because like even tarot cards, it's random. It's you're just dealing cards. You know, I don't know. I don't know that there's nothing that like could be classified as psychics. You know, people that are more perceptive or
I think there's
so that
okay.
I can get behind.
I think we're on the same page. I don't believe that there's some supernatural power or some weird connection that you have with the dead that help you to be able to see the future. I do believe that there are people that are very perceptive and can really read people really well. And I'm not saying like their future. I'm saying like
There now.
you're depressed, you're shady, or you've got a kind heart. I can just tell you've got a kind heart. You're a loving person. You're empathetic. You know, and then you can if you can figure those kind of things out, all you got to do is build a narrative around those few things, and you sound like a freaking awesome psychic.
No, and honestly, it doesn't sound like I feel
Now, I
like
don't think this happened on the
yeah,
phone
no, we're
with these
putting too much
people, though.
pressure on the Miss Cleo hotline here. That is not what was happening here, and
No.
that's one of my favorite things about Fraudsters is the next episode, they talk
Yeah,
to somebody who worked as a phone psychic for a very long time. Well, months, you know, months at a time, and they got his kind of perspective on everything, and it further confirmed that nothing magical was happening here. That was a random dude in his apartment trying to pay for his apartment in New York, smoking cigarettes and using a girl's voice. And like a Southern girl, I think was his character.
yeah.
And it just
Uh,
sounds ridiculous. But then you get to like kind of this weird nugget of like humanity to this whole thing is he felt like a lot of people that were calling in just were lonely, you know, or
yeah,
just had hit the bottom of the barrel or it it ended up kind of being sad. You know what I mean? Did you feel that way when you listen to his thing? Like, because he's
yeah.
talking about the one of the ones that made him just like, okay, I'm part of the problem here. Like, I'm not like a moral thing.
Yes.
Somebody called in and somebody was like concerned that maybe one of their relatives was abusing their children, and he's like, oh, please, like, call the cops. Like, we're not a stand-in for like actual anything. And so he kind of just did it for fun. And I would have done that. You know, like in college, if somebody offered me to like go pretend to be a psychic on the phone, I would have
Yeah,
won it. I did much
when
worse
we got
job.
on that, I would have I was going to ask like, would you work for this company back in the day?
I
And
definitely think so. Not right now, I wouldn't. I'm not sitting on the phone and like
yeah, no.
BSing people. But in college, I would have thought that was funny or fun.
I don't know. Maybe I would have done it for a little bit.
I
Who
could have
knows?
stuck
Who
with it.
knows?
I never
I'm
liked
trying. Yeah, no, definitely wouldn't have stuck with it. Um, I think it would be one of those things that, like, almost as a prank, you would do and a joke, and then make a little bit of money and this just leave. Uh, it's almost like getting paid to crank call people, but they're calling you, so it takes most of the weird part out of crank calling people.
Yeah, it really does. But it's super interesting to hear kind of how they break all this down.
Liftoff. Liftoff. American return to space is discovered. Discovery clears the tower.
This episode of the Podcast Discovery Show is sponsored by The Pop Culture Show. The Pop Culture Show is a show that gets into the nitty-gritty in the world of TV, music, movies, and celebrity news. The show isn't hosted by just anybody. It's hosted by three friends that have known each other for more than 30 years and have a long tenure in the entertainment industry.
All three hosts, Barnes, Leslie, and Cubby, have worked or are currently working in radio or TV production, from Billboard, Rolling Stones, to CMT. And I swear they've worked everywhere in between. They've worked everywhere. And they have a ridiculous connection and finger on the pulse of pop culture. I listened to a few episodes, and in fact, some of the things that we're going to talk about this week in our Discovery Weekly show, I learned from their show. I listened to their newest episode, and no, they do have a great chemistry, and it's a great show, and it's very entertaining, and you can learn a lot about what's going on, especially like movies and TV shows. They talk a lot about Netflix series and things that are specifically now during COVID that are streaming on different platforms, and what's the best thing worth watching, things that are not worth watching. Not only do they talk about their take on what's going on in the world of entertainment, but they also have some great interviews as well. They've interviewed Goldberg.
Oh, man.
The WWE champ. I remember him growing up, man. They've interviewed rock stars like Jewel, Butch Walker, Collective Soul, and one of my favorites that I saw on the list, I need to listen to this episode because I love him, Joe Gatto from Impractical Jokers.
Oh, man.
I love this show. It's hilarious, and I've got to listen to that episode.
Yeah, but in the end, it's a really fun hour-long ride through the halls of pop culture that leaves you laughing, informed, and excited for the next episode of the Pop Culture Show. You can find out more about their show on popcultureshow.com or anywhere you find your podcasts.
So Miss Cleo's real name, if her bad accent wasn't enough evidence that she wasn't actually Jamaican, her real name was Ira Del Harris. And the thing that is hilarious and also just like crazy is like she came up with the name Miss Cleo. Like Zach said, literally it was a character from her play at a previous fraud thing she had done. And she had came up with that character. But when she signed the contract with the Psychic Readers Network, they got basically the IP on that character. So when she stopped working for them, she could no longer even go by Miss Cleo. So when she needed her next scheme, she had to go by something else. And her new name was the Seer. It's not near as catchy, man.
No, Miss Cleo is much better.
But she did triple down on the Jamaican accent. She never got rid of it.
No, she was like, it's definitely staying. No, and I mean, she also like called herself formerly known as Miss Cleo. You know, she tried to find a way to bring it in there. But yeah, it was all ridiculous. And then she's constantly marketing herself. You know, they in the end of this episode, they have an interview with her where she's talking about all this weird stuff, from like her weird merch stuff, like her calendar. That was by far the weirdest one for me, is the calendar. She's like, I took each one of these pictures and hand curated this calendar. It's like, who cares? Who's buying a calendar? Like, who's buying like, is it just pictures of her? Is it selfies of Miss Cleo? 12 of them? I don't know. I don't understand a calendar at all. But I think really what it came down to is any possible way to make $1. And so she would just put all of this out there, and then she
had an
book.
App. So she's people want to get in touch with me. So I don't know who she got her to make it, but she had somebody make an app so that basically she could continue her kind of
not talking
fraud
to
thing
and acting like she was.
Acting like she was talking to. It's just, and she's like, I don't even know how it works, but I got one.
It's technology. Yeah. So she did all that. She wrote a book that had one of my favorite moments in the episode was this book, because they read an excerpt from it, and it was essentially like, I don't know. It's like trying.
It was almost like relationship advice, right?
Yeah, but it's so stupid. Like, it is just so stupid. So the story was paraphrased. It set up this like date between this couple, And she's like, okay, have you ever had a situation like this where you're like, I want my boyfriend to take me to a really nice dinner. And I was like, hey, we should go to dinner. And he's like, okay. And he took me to a park and gave me corn dogs. And I was like,
And then she was mad at him.
yeah,
And then
I have so many questions as soon as she says that, because how do you cook corn dogs at the park? Do you take pre-warmed corn dogs with you? Like, corn dogs is the weirdest possible choice she could have put in that story. You can't grill a corn dog. I guess you could. That's not how you do it, though. That's not the right
hey,
way.
maybe there's a mini carnival at the park that weekend. You don't know.
I mean, that park sounds sick then, because if it's fresh corn dogs, then why is she complaining? But basically, in the end, her
Exactly.
anecdote was like, if you don't want corn dogs at the park, you should tell them that we should go to a different restaurant. You should maybe say the name of the restaurant. And this is in a book she wanted people to pay money for. And it's like,
This is my very deep insight as a psychic into your relationships.
when she started talking about corn dogs, I was like, she really is psychic. She gets it. No, it's just, the whole thing is just her constantly scamming everybody with just like random garbage, or pretending to be psychic, or apps. Basically, just all of it was just any possible way to make more money. So it was just ridiculous. But in the end, they made a ton of money.
So much money.
Just a
And even
ton of money.
they even mentioned, like, they just kind of said it in passing, but I mean, we'll talk about it. She was a good marketer, because
Definitely was.
when she did pass away, she had a net worth of like a couple $1 million. Like, she wasn't just fly by night. She made a little bit of money at this place. She continued. And I mean, I get it. She was good at what she did. She was good at defrauding people money and making people believe her.
These people $1 billion for not talking to Miss Cleo.
Now, I was actually surprised with how little money she got for working for this place. I mean, if you do the math, that's a lot of money, technically.
No, and I agree, because she was making, I think she said 24 a minute, and like
20% a minute.
and a lot of people were making like 10 to 12 cents a minute. But if she signed a contract for the Miss Cleo name, what was in that package? You know what I mean? Was it something where you get like stock, or was it something where you get like a signing bonus for the contract? This was not a normal situation. You know what I mean? They paid her something for that character, for like her marketing work too. So I think she made okay money, especially because it's just a phone scam. There's nothing there. Nobody had to work. Like, I don't know. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, they made a ton of money. And in the end, they were given a $4,000 fine. Half of their billables were taken out. They're like, you cannot collect on half.
Yeah. So, okay, this blew my mind. And they talk about this much more in the next two episodes. The first episode was a lot about Miss Cleo. Second two episodes was a lot more about the Psychic Readers Network. And they talk about the FTC and our federal government, finally cracking down on them to an extent. I mean, basically, they're like, hey, don't do that. Give us all the money you have in your account. They're like, we got $4,000. Give us that $4,000.
Yeah.
And then they're like, all right, how much money did you steal from people? $1 billion. How much have you not gotten yet? We haven't gotten about 500,000. Okay, you can't take that. But the $500,000 you got before that? No, 500 million. I'm sorry. 500 million, right?
I think so. I think it was
because
like right?
Yeah, I think they had to pay $500,000 in billables forgiven. But basically, how much they got out? They made $1 billion.
They netted,
and they got out
millions of dollars from this.
They made hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's crazy. And no one went to jail. It's like, I mean, it's just crazy.
The only thing they were able to get them on is like some of the extra stuff, because, and it was one of my favorite parts of like the transition on this show is like, because first you're talking about Miss Cleo, but then you figure out that Miss Cleo is not the problem. I mean,
the tip of the iceberg.
She's not great. She was a made up Jamaican pretending to be a psychic on a phone line. Not great. But the people who ran this business were really, really crimey. And like, it was ridiculous. And the things like the FTC got them on were like, they would call your house over and over again and tell you that you needed to call, or they would call over and over again until you needed to pay your bill. And they would harass people. They would mail you stuff all the time. They would harass you to try and make more money out of you. And then they would also, when they had you like call in because you just got a giant phone bill and you want to contest it, it would call into the 900 number. You would call in and pay to try and fix your phone bill. And
So to contest your bill, you would have to call the number and make another bill. It's just like a snake eating its tail. It was horrible.
It never stopped.
So grimy.
It never stopped. And like, that was one of my favorite parts about Fraudsters is you think it's going a certain direction and then it changes, because then the next, like, they talked to somebody that worked at Psychic Readers Network, and like, how much did he know about the whole process? Like, he said that he wasn't really about getting everybody's information so they could harass him and everything like that. He was kind of just having fun, it sounded like. And
I love that when they hired him,
there was a lot of
he didn't even know what he was getting hired for. He just knew he was getting phone calls.
Phone acting job.
Like, literally, they didn't even like be like, "Hey, are you a little bit psychic? Can you even hold a conversation?" They just would give them the job. They had no concern as to who was actually doing the phone psychic stuff. They just wanted to, and I love how they promised them $10 an hour, but that's because if you're good and can keep someone on the phone long enough, you might make $10 an hour. And he did this for a whole summer.
Things to like invoice for that too.
Mm-hmm. He said he never even invoiced, so he worked there and never got one dime.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's just it's the wildest like kind of premise, but I feel confident saying that based on his story, there might be psychics. There was not any psychics at the Psychic Readers Network.
I will say there was probably zero.
They did not care. At all. He didn't even get a call back until he did the girl voice. The guy was just like ignoring him, but he lived with two girls at the time, his roommates, and
they immediately got the job.
So he basically did his character that he ended up doing while he worked there, and he got a call back. But I don't know. It was just all ridiculous. And this show really digs into the weird stuff they were doing, because there was a lot of stuff once you start digging into what all was going on behind the scenes. And that really kind of kicks into episode 3. They start really digging into, okay, who owned this thing? Who were the decision makers at this company? How were they going about what they were doing? And all 3 of them were doing like weird stuff the whole time, buying weird houses like that are too expensive. One guy started a pizza chain.
Yeah.
Like,
I love, they talk about it, and it becomes a little bit of a joke, but they talk about these fraudsters. I think 2 of them bought the house of Jim Baker. That's the guy, right?
Yeah.
The televangelist that got busted and was in prison. So he lost his house, but he was a fraudster. And so these guys bought his house. And they're just talking, they made this great joke about like, what is there, like some real estate company that only sells to fraudsters?
Yeah, and that's another thing that's worth mentioning. This show is also hilarious the whole time. So we're talking about some of the crazy detail they bring out. It is really funny.
They're funny guys. I will say this. When I first started listening to it, it took me 10 minutes to get over the, like, I don't know. It felt like a shock jock radio show for a second, for a little bit. But then when it actually got into the stuff, I was like, okay, I love this. But it almost got me to where I was going to turn it off at the beginning, because, they came in real hot and it was like, oh, hey guys, welcome to Fraudsters, that kind of stuff.
And it's literally their pilot episode. It's an awesome pilot, honestly. But yeah, no, they do kind of come in pretty. There's a lot of bits and everything like that, but really they settle in by even the second episode, where you can kind of see them.
I swear it was like halfway through the first episode, I was like, all right, I already feel like this is much better.
But yeah, really funny, and you learn a ton about fraudsters, which is also interesting because you can then see these kind of like patterns and stuff happening again. I don't know how popular this kind of thing is anymore, like a phone line at all in general. I don't know, like, because I don't know, that seems like a 90s thing, like 90s, early 2000s, where there was like sex lines, and there was just psychic phone lines, and there was just, you could call just phone lines and talk to random people. I never got it, but apparently some people did.
You remember that time a long time ago when we were in high school, actually middle school, and my cell phone got stolen by someone in our class, and we were going on a long trip.
I do remember that.
Did you know that she called a bunch of sex phone numbers on the school bus ride there, and we had like a $300 phone bill that next month because she stole my phone and then, for entertainment purposes, called a bunch of sex lines with my phone.
That is interesting. That's
I don't even know if my parents
at least what he told
or
her
not.
parents. It's like, no, she did it.
Hey now,
She
now.
took my phone. I don't know how that happened. That's so weird. All right, see you later.
That's again. I never should have told you that story now.
Mm.
Anyway, there are so many things that we didn't touch on very much about the episode. They interviewed Dr. Fraud, who is a guy that has kind of made his name in really uncovering fraudsters and really digging into them and talking about them and kind of like bringing things to light. So that was fascinating, and I'm sure he's probably on a lot of these episodes. But the last thing I want to touch on is I do want to say they brought it up multiple times, and I was like, man, it is so true. The disparity of like the response by the law for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's probably the same for almost all these fraudsters.
No, the FTC got involved on a civil suit. That was brought by somebody. That wasn't like everybody got in trouble just on their own by law enforcement.
It's like the dude that sells weed on the corner probably gets more time, and probably
more time than zero. Wait, none of these guys were arrested?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He probably has more money of a fine than they got. $4,000 fine. I bet you if you get busted for selling weed, you're gonna get more than a $4,000 fine plus go to jail. These guys stole money from people, hundreds of millions of dollars, and all they had to do was pay $4,000,
and
none of them went to jail
anymore. Just stop.
It was just, they talk about it, and it was mind-boggling because it's true. It's like,
true.
If you want to get away with crime, just do it in a suit and be white, and you'll be fine.
Those things surely would help. But yeah, no, it is ridiculous that there's zero consequence for what they did, because there was none. So even the FTC fines were mostly to try and pay out people who were part of the civil suit. So it's like it's just ridiculous. But overall, absolutely incredible show. Me and Kirk listened to the whole thing just back to back to back. Listened to all three on the road trip, and we're just in it the whole time. Absolutely hilarious. You learn a ton, and just a great premise for a show where you're just exploring fraudsters. It'll, I'm sure, make you mad because there's some of these people that are even worse than the Psychic Readers Network that are just like trying to rip people off of their like phone lines or whatever. There's people who like are worse, I'm sure, on this show. But
yeah, they talk about Jim Baker. I think that one probably would be the one that would just be so cringeworthy and just so frustrating to me.
Yeah.
Televangelists they feel like the grimiest of grimy. They talk about Anna Sorkin, Al Flores.
I don't know a lot of the names on like the list of their thing, but I kind of like that because then I can go through and not know who these people are, and there's a chance that I knew like their effect, like something around them, but I didn't know the name of the fraudster themselves.
Mm-hmm. It was a great show, and they're on. The only thing is, it was a Spotify exclusive. So if you don't have Spotify, you probably weren't able to listen to this show. But
it's free. Spotify's free. It just has ads, right?
Yeah.
You can listen to it.
You're right. And so it was a great show, and they're on the Last Podcast Network. So the Last Podcast on the Left has a network. I looked at their shows. We've covered some of their shows. We talked about Wizard and Bruiser before. That's on their network, and there was multiple other ones that I've listened to that I want to talk about one day. So they have some good shows. I didn't even know they had a network till this show.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
But yeah, go listen to Fraudsters. It's great.
So now, our first recommendation for 2021. And this is one that I found, and I thought that it would be a great one that Kirk would like because it sounded kind of Reply All-ish. And Kirk has listened to every possible episode of Reply All.
I have.
And this show is called Underunderstood. Here's their little blurb on it. On each episode of Underunderstood, we find a question the internet can't answer. Maybe it's a dead-end Wikipedia page, an abandoned Reddit thread, or an unanswered question on Twitter. And we fill in all the gaps. It's part chat show, part documentary, and almost always surprising. And so basically it comes down to a bunch of journalists, investigative journalists, podcasters go and explore sometimes odd topics. And the one that we listened to, and it was awesome, we loved listening to it, is Closing the Loop on China's Mystery Seeds. And we think you guys are going to like it too.
I never knew this was a thing, and now I want to dig into this even more, even after listening. I know. Anyway, we'll talk about it more. I'm excited to talk about this one. It was great. We listened to it on the same road trip, and I'm excited to talk about this one.
Me too.
It was definitely an interesting discussion, so I'm excited. All right, guys. So thank you for tuning in to the first episode of 2021, Season 5, Podcast Discovery Show. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We would love for you to get in touch. We have a Facebook group called the Podcast Discovery Club, and our Twitter is @thepdsofficial. We also record the show live every Friday night at 8 o'clock on Twitch. We would love for you to be part of the show while we're recording it.
If you want to support the show, we have a number of ways you can do that. From our Patreon to our affiliate links, they're always linked in the show notes. In the end, you support the show just by listening, and it means the world to us. So thank you so much for being a part of our journey.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.